I think the internet's going to go out on us here in just a minute.
Oh, no, that's not good.
They're like resetting the Wi-Fi in the middle of the day for some reason.
Mm.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
All right, go ahead and kick us off. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn. Today is Monday, February 14th. As always, please raise your hand if you have a question or enter it on the Q&A, and we'll be glad to answer your questions for you. Our host today is Will Pedersen, and we're ready to go whenever you are.
Yeah, and Dave, go ahead. What you got today for us, sir?
Yeah, I had looked into this briefly and kind of looked through the documentation, but my question kind of centers around, I guess, email or Outlook accounts and being able to check somebody's out of office to be able to say, okay, well, let me try to make this assignment, but if I see they're out of office, let me write a rule or some other flow that basically says, okay, if they're out, then do it to this other person. I guess I'm aware that you can set up some sort of a service account or an account that has to have access to everybody else's account.
Are you using the Exchange module already for this? Like, do you have an approach here that you're working on?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious what my options are to be able to try to accomplish that. I mean, what do you think is the best way, and what do you recommend to be able to
I don't
do
know.
like
I'm wondering if the Exchange module gives you that ability. I don't know that you can check this in any way that I've done in the past, at least. So we do have an Exchange. Can you guys, Maru, can you hear me?
It paused for a second, and then you can.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry,
Yeah,
they're doing
fine.
for some reason our IT team does Wi-Fi resets during the middle of the day. It's wonderful. So you can get out of office state here. So I think what comes back here is out of office settings object.
Nice. Okay.
Right. And if I look at that, what does that look like? Data Explorer, out of office setting is state. I bet state is value, state.values probably like some like an enum or something that comes back.
Yeah.
So this assumes you're using Exchange specifically, but it can check status of out of office status for those users for you.
Okay, so that Exchange, I guess where and how would I configure?
Yeah, you're going to do it here. Like if you do constant, you're going to build your Exchange connector, just like if it's an SMTP connector. So let's assume it's, sectors Exchange versions. You just give it URL. OAuth token. Does it require OAuth? Seems weird. I haven't actually set this up before, but I do think we have some docs about using it.
I gotcha. And that account that you're using to go on to to set up that Exchange server, I guess, property on that, you have to put in an account. There's nothing special that you have to do with that account to be able to check that, right? It just has to be valid.
Yeah, there might be permissions things there. So I would start with a super user account and then try with a less permissive account and see.
I see.
But I don't know, and I don't think we have documented well at what the permission level requirements for that account might be. We do see that from time to time, though. Likely, if it's a normal account, it's fine. I wouldn't imagine that this needs to be some kind of super permissioned account. But
I see.
I've never used a step, so it could be.
Gotcha. That Exchange module, I think you're probably using 7 here, right?
It's in 6 too. Yep. It's in
Okay,
earlier versions. It's not newer.
got it. Okay. Okay, I'll give that a go and see see what, if anything, we may need to do to try to make that work.
Yeah, I was not thinking we were gonna have this step. This is great. That's actually a really useful thing. Like,
Yeah, I thought,
you know, before
I thought it
you
was
check.
gonna,
Yeah. I mean,
I thought it was
like,
gonna be
great
way more
assignment.
complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, no, this is neat. Anything else, man?
No, we were just kind of tossing it around internally to see if, like, what our options were. So I figured I'd ask. If this wasn't going to work, I think what we were going to do is have it, you know, we have a like a default send from account that monitors it monitors. We have it set up to monitor that inbox on a job, so we could probably parse the kickback on it for their, you know, out of office or whatever. But
Right.
I think this is a better way to handle it if we can try to make this work.
Yeah, I mean, assuming they use Exchange, this seems much easier than that.
Awesome. Okay. I think that's it.
Okay, wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir. You bet. Now Maru did remind me, for everyone who's got a question, hang tight for me just for a moment, that we had a pre-submitted question from Jake. I just pasted it in the chat. Is there any way you can use the RunRuleFlowStep to output multiple branches or paths within your flow? Oh yeah. Yeah, great question, Jake. You can. So you can turn a subflow. Jake, I'm going to give you the ability to talk if you want to come off mute and clarify anything. I'm just going to build a new flow here. It's pretty straightforward, which is treat subflow as a rule. So this is what I take your question to mean, which is, how can I create multiple output paths from a subflow? And it's pretty straightforward. In a normal flow, you get a start step and an end step. You can search for end, and you can add as many uniquely named end steps as you want. Unique 1 and unique 2, for example. And then you could imagine a place maybe where I do something like a string match. And I won't fully configure this, but let's assume I'm matching A and B. And then I can say A and B go to unique 1 and 2, and no match goes here. And now if I use this flow as a step in another flow, or use it as a subflow, we can come over here to run subflow and pick or create and pick, and I'll pick flow 1. It's going to show as having unique outcome paths based on the number of end steps available to it. So your job is just to design a flow that it has to, of course, go to one of these, but you'll get multiple outcome paths. And now you can build some sophisticated routing logic in a subflow and reuse it as you see fit, you know, and then do stuff like you might want to change the icon and things like that to make it more informational. Shape type, there we go. Circle.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about string match stuff.
Ooh, that doesn't look very good, but there you go. But yeah, does that give you the answer to your question?
Yeah, it does. I appreciate it.
Okay, you bet. All right, and Corbin, sir, go ahead. Did you have a question for us today, Corbin? You can come off mute and just ask it, or type it in the chat or the Q&A section.
I was asking, but I have a dialogue to actually let me speak. There we go. So I'm trying to see if a truth table can provide information back on which data fields matched. I'm trying to, in addition to the result, I'd like to get information on which fields matched. I'd actually just learned today about the ignore rules with null values and ignore rules with empty values. So like I see essentially everything has to match, but I'd like to see kind of ignoring those ones, which were the ones that matched. The end goal here is going to be so we can pick the best match when we have multiple results based on which data fields matched and applying some weights to those particular data fields.
I know we can do this with a rule. I know we can return the pass or fail of the rule set of the rules in a rule set that get called. So the question is, I have a truth table here. It's gonna have, say, 3 rows. And possibly, because the way a truth table functions, 2 of those 3 rows might return true. I get both true, I get a list out of the 2 rows that matched. And you want to then possibly compare those 2 to figure out which one you should take of the 2?
Yeah, like let's say you have 3 different data elements in the truth table that you're matching against, and 2 of them had 2 ones that matched, and you I want to see which ones matched so I can determine how to prioritize my multiple matches.
Well, let's see here. Let's just create some inputs. STR 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll just make some quick columns here. STR1 starts with, and we'll add A and add a new row, B and C. Okay. I guess we'll add another string starts with here. It would do STR2. And we'll do starts with, I'll do like O. Actually, let me do it this way. A, C. And we'll start with, sorry, I'll get these examples backward. I'll say ends with O. O. And then this will end with, I'll just do O as well, I guess. And let's change our output data here. Because I don't know that, I don't know how to do, I don't think I know how to do what you're asking for. Let's just call this row 1, row 2, as if this is some sort of code we're passing out. Row 3, okay. And let me save this and let me put this in a flow. And I'll run truth table, pick or create, and pick all truth table 1. All right, and let me just quickly set up a test to run. I'm not doing anything with STR3, so I'll just do 1 and 2. And map those in. And I'll go ahead and ignore 3. So let me see here. If STR is A and O, and save a quick test. Oops. What's that? And I run this, I'm gonna get 2 items out, right? Row 1 and row 2. Now, I guess my first thought is, why can't you build another condition? Like, why is it required that you get multiple results out? Couldn't you construct the truth table so that you only get 1 result based on this other condition you're gonna check downstream? Does that make sense?
Yeah, currently in our legacy system, we do get multiples and we have to go through this process of determining what the best match is. So that's what I'm trying to reproduce here. So like we're getting both these, and let's say the starts with was the more important one for the match. I want to be able to determine that's what matched. And in our scenario, we have like 10 different variables rather than just 2. And a lot of them can be null. So we want to ignore the ones that are nulls and find out which ones match, and then we have a series of weights we apply to each of the variables to say, well, if it's this one, this is the most important one, so we pick that rule because that one had the match.
The least appetizing way would just be to have a unique identifier be in the output data.
And that we did do in our POC with your team for this initially. It was built that way where we explicitly had to put in the output of the truth table, like what the highest priority match weight was. So we just get that coming out. but since you showed me how to use the external truth table and set up like the UI for building the entities, and we're looking at having someone have to enter that, then we're going to have to depend on the user entering those rules properly with kind of metadata about the rule itself in the entry process, and that seems a little bit convoluted to me.
Could you construct like some kind of like key of some sort out of the user entered data? Is there something like that you could just build up like a, because you could, if you're doing it the way that you're doing it, then you could just combine a couple fields together to create like a unique key, I guess. And then have that key be one of the output fields. Your user doesn't need to know that they're creating the key or even put it in. They just know.
Could I have it automatically set like the names of the fields that aren't null on those entities? Because I set up the, I have a form set up, so maybe there's a way I could have it, because really anything that's not null in there are going to be the ones that matched. So anything that's not null, I kind of need a list of the ones that are not null for the entity that matched on the entity itself then.
Yeah, I mean, you could take in all of the selections from the form, and like these are all strings or some sort of simple type. The user is just picking or either ignoring or setting on this form, right? So you could,
right, they might only set 3 fields of the 10 variables in there for a particular rule.
And so yeah, you could loop that list and then ignore maybe empty strings or null ones, and then you could get like maybe a comma separated string of the fields that have been added, or you could do, or some other way you could combine all those things together into a single string that is itself an output of the truth table.
All right, so then that would just become an output of the truth table then, and then I would build that into my add or edit entity flows.
Yeah, right, exactly right. Yeah, and then the flow takes care of identifying which fields have been added or not left null. Let me say it that way, right? And then takes their title or the value. You probably have to do a little bit of mapping in the flow, because it probably wouldn't be it's not going to be a graceful looking flow, right? You might have to have a truth table that looks up that maps. You have to map from like property to name in some way, right? I guess like you'd check all of the, if you'd have a drop down list for items, right? And if that's null, then you'd have to set like a string to be, or you'd ignore. If it's not null, then is it the field titles that you're after, not the actual values?
Yeah, because then those titles, I'll probably pass into another flow where I'll store my weights for those different titles. So if I can just capture the titles of which ones weren't null.
Yeah, you could definitely do this. It just it wouldn't be like a graceful looking flow kind of, but like it'd be something like this. Create a new form. And let's say I have a drop down list here, and this is going to be like my, field 1 is what I'll call it. And I'll just make this static text, A, B, C. I'll save this. And then here, you'd have to do something. You might do this in a subflow to make it reusable, but you might like do like, how about is empty? And if it's empty, false. If it's empty, true, you would just go on, right? You wouldn't do anything, but otherwise you might go to probably like an add item. You probably build a list. So let's build an empty list here. So we might build like a string list. This would be list of added fields or something, right? This is a string list. And then in this add on to list step, you'd check see is empty, and this would be, you would check the where's it at? Output field 1. Did I just see it and look at it? Field 1. Field 1 is the selected field name. And then what you could do is add it to a list here. A new item would be field 1, and then we would change value. So we're gonna do something like this. But what you would kind of do is, I'm just gonna group these just to quickly create a couple. Yeah, there we go. And you might have to do a set of these types of operations, if this makes sense, kind of like a daisy. I think about this as like a waterfall or a daisy chain.
I see
And on
one for each field.
Yeah, and then you would go through, and here you would actually, new item wouldn't be field 1. You would actually set this to be like, you would say, you would call this like your field name thing, right? And then this would be, you just do like constant mappings, and this would be, other field name. And then it would go through it and ignore all of the empty ones. And then you'd get a string list back. And then maybe at the end, you'd like you could join that string list together. Let's assume you're done here after you've gone through all of your fields. And you could take your string list in, which would be a list of added fields. And then you might do like a dash, right? And then it comes through and you'd get, field name 1 dash field name 2 dash field name, how many ever. And then you could just have that, you would have that save as one of the fields on your entity you're using to drive your external truth table.
That makes sense. I'll play with that. Thanks. And actually, while you were looking at that, if you don't mind, I had a second question that goes right into like what you just did on that form.
Yeah, sure.
I was just wondering if you can set up a drop-down list with a system constant as the list of values there, rather than typing the values in here. Could you have that pull from a system constant for that list items?
Oh yeah, you do change it, use data name and say the list for, I'll just call it list for DDL, right? And then here, you'd have to go create a system constant. I guess you have to use lookup lists here. You can't.
Use them for some of the other stuff.
Yeah, you need to use a lookup list. I think you want the list to come from that. Reset constants, add lookup list flow, data pair. We don't want that. Add define constant. And the flow constant type is a single string. You don't want that. What I would probably do is just create a different, where am I at here? I would create a different data type and just hold that list into the data type and just fetch them. The lookup lists wouldn't really work. But there's no reason you couldn't just create another entity called lookup list data that lives in another folder in the same way somewhere. And in that way, you can add items. If you want to add or edit those items, you just have another data set to do it. So like if I went and created an entity here called drop down list items, I'll just give it a single property and get my CRUD actions for free here. And then in my flow, I would just fetch those things and pass them in. Very similar to the external truth table thing we've kind of been, that you and I have worked on.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think that I call it something DDL items, and then I can just pass the results into list for DDL. I can select that entity results output here.
Okay. So
and now I just manage that independently of the flow. Sorry, go ahead.
So I just had to set up like a folder to store those list items in somewhere.
Right, exactly. Yep,
Okay.
similar thing.
Be a folder that would just contain that list. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, and now, all right, Murray, can you remind me if you need, let me make sure this is posted for everyone to see. Oh, everyone here. Can you remind me if we need the service account for the database password during an upgrade? We will need to have additional resource available if we will need that. Yes, yes, you do. You should. Yes, it's going, because it uninstalls the service and reinstalls it, and you're using a service account and to run the service. Let me unmute you if you want to ask a question, Maria. Yes, you do need to re-enter. You need to select show service account settings in the installer, even if it's an upgrade. And re-enter the username and password, because the way the installer works is it removes the service and then reinstalls it. So every time you do that, you do need to use the re-enter the service account password.
Okay, that's as simple as my question was this time. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. All right, Dave, Dave, did you have another question, or is your hand still just up? Okay, guess that answers that question. Okay, and all right, Leah has got a question here. Let me let you speak here. Leah, what is the best way to save outcome data from a truth table? Okay, like you just want to, just the results, whatever the results are, you just want to save them. You just want to save them off.
Yep, can you hear me? I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm- Yeah,
I
that's
can
it.
now.
I just want to save and kind of be able to look at the frequency of certain hits on the truth tables.
Okay, one thing we could look at you doing now, you could just create a data structure, and that data structure would map to your output data of your truth table, and then you could just save it. We also have a thing here, and Corbin, this might be interesting to you as well. If you look at a truth table in a flow, I'm not going to be able to get this to work the first time, but let's see if we can't get it. I'll call it audit example. There's a thing called an audit history. Now this can, if you're pounding this truth table with requests, this could get out of control. So I don't know that this handles large data very well, but under audit is capture audit history and capture audit phrase history. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reselect that truth table that we just walked through creating here. And I'm going to select capture audit and audit phrase. Now I'm going to try to find rule audit history and help this remind me how to set this up. Capture audit history. Yep. So there's a rule audit history table. All right, well, let's just see if we can get this to work out. So folder ID, let's create a folder. I'm gonna bumble my way through this. I apologize while I get this set up. But we can get some of this stuff maybe for a little bit for free for you. I'm gonna create a regular decisions folder. And in that folder, and I'm gonna copy the ID of that folder at the URL. I'm gonna put that ID here. Rule audit ID. Rule audit name. Those are my inputs. What is a rule audit ID? These inputs do not need information mapped into them in order to store the audit history. Amber, could you get a document request, update request in to have this updated, please? Like this doesn't tell us what these are for.
No problem, I'll submit that.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just see here in our flow. If we execute this now, I'm just going to put some constant values in. And let me just run this. So this is audit example. I'll run my flow. I've run that. Let me create a report. And under my report, I'm going to search for audit and rule audit history. And let's look for rule name, rule text, rule plain text. What else? There's a bunch of other stuff here. Audit name, audit ID. Okay, so that's how we can just create unique ones if we want to. Entity folder ID. Did it actually add? Didn't add anything there. Odd. Result data. There you go. Result data. So what are we looking at here? I just run this report. If your data is only informational, like you want to see like how many times this a certain type of input like came in, you can see like the plain text description. Like if it's not used in the flow, you just want to keep track of this over time to see how many times is like a certain row in a truth table returned or a certain rule returned true or false. We have this rule audit history feature. It's only available on the, you can't call the truth table directly, but you can call, of course, you can call a truth table in a flow. So rule audit history might get you some, what you're after here. And I recommend looking at this. I'll just dump this article into the chat window. And basically you just click, you capture audit history, capture phrase audit. Let me actually see if phrase audit is different here. I'm gonna create a different report. And I apologize for bumbling through this. I'm less familiar with this part of our product than I should be. Rule phrase audit history. And what is this going to do? Verb name, value. Oh yeah, look, that'll give you the per row execution. Scorb, I don't know if this is interesting to you, sir, but this gives you a bunch. Phrase result, true, false, audit name, audit ID, rule ID, rule name. There it is, truth table 1. So this will give you, the phrase one will give you detailed results about what rows of the truth table executed and save it into a database table. And then this rule ID, these audit ID, audit name, those are properties on the truth table. So you can create like unique records here. And then you could use the report designer to report on those things. So if it's just track the like if as the things returning true or false over time, I'd say this is the most built-in way. Also, though, you could, like, if you know what your truth table outputs. In our example here, if we look at Data Explorer, we can see result is a string. There's no reason we couldn't create a database type and just save whatever is, we create a database structure here. So let me create data types, database structure, and I'll say save truth table 1 results or whatever. And I'll just say it'll be, just output value. Let's just do this for now. And then here I can go back to my flow. And what I could do is come to user defined types, database structures, save truth table results, and use a create step. And then what I can do is item to create. I can say build data and then output value. I named output value. That's actually going to come from my truth table. I'll make my truth table only send a single result back out just to make this easier. And then I can map in my result. So in this example here, the truth table will run. Whatever it passes out, I'm going to pass into a create step from a database structure I created. And then I can get a recording that way. This won't give you, this kind of goes to Corbin's question, this won't give you the details of what was actually executed or not. The rule audit phrase 1 will give you information about what was executed. I think either of these approaches allows you to track at the appropriate level of detail the execution of the rules. Is that any questions about that?
No, I think that answers it. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. And we do post these on YouTube. So if you want to review that at a more normal speed, you're welcome. Okay, can I pull that information in the current executing flow? Yeah, you could, I guess. You could fetch that, Corbin. I think. Well, you know the ID of your truth table, or you could put the rule audit ID as a property. So do you know the initial instance ID though? Okay, you'd have to do something. I think so. I think you could. Yeah, we're about to get into, here you go. Let's see. I'm gonna make a thing here. It'll be called current rule ID. I'm gonna make a string. And then I'm gonna pass current rule ID to rule audit ID. And then what I'm gonna do is, I don't know that there might have to be a pause here. This data might write on a background. It's probably gonna write on a back end, like on a background thread. So I doubt it's sequential. But theoretically, you might be able to, oh, maybe not, rule. Audit, default audit settings, go away, audit settings type. Rule audit. I guess you can definitely fetch them from the database from like a raw SQL step. In fact, if you ever wanted to look at what table they're in, you could just go to your report that I wrote, which is here, and you can click View SQL in the top right-hand corner, expand this small window, and you can see we're actually doing a from rule audit phrase history here. You might be able to, but I bet, but can't confirm. And Corbell, if you want to ask any questions about, you can talk again. I bet these don't get saved sequentially, so you might be some unprogrammable pause event. Like I don't think these they probably get written on a background thread, so there could be like sequencing issues here.
Okay, it might not be safe to just rely on the audit. It might be a better approach to go with the first attempt with adding it to the entity itself.
Yeah, it's more work for sure, but I think it's safer because I don't think that we could or even should rely on this to happen sequentially with the existing workflow. I'm sure these get passed off to a backend thread, and if they don't, somebody will identify a problem at a high enough throughput at some point. We'll identify it's because we're writing these rule phrases, and we'll move it to a background thread. So I think, right, like I would say the thing we workshopped is a better and safer, if not more, though it requires more work, solution.
Okay, could we submit that as a new feature request to get metadata information out of a truth table?
Yeah, sure. We can, I'd be happy to ask someone to get that in. Excuse me. Who's on the call? Is there anyone that can take that? Yeah, let me write myself a note. Yes, I couldn't tell you what that timeline might look like, but yes, I'd be happy to get that to the dev team.
I'll start working on this approach, but it'd be nice to get the ball rolling on trying to get some metadata to see if maybe in a future version we could replace this approach with that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And any other questions from anyone today? Okay. All right. I think that's everything. And we're past 12:30. So thanks for the questions, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow. And as always, if you got anyone else at your orgs who's got questions about stuff, please direct them to these. These are the best place for you guys to get the tough questions answered. So appreciate the time. Talk to you tomorrow.